the way we've been doing it all these years is not working. What do we do instead, to your question? So instead, we have to change the experience. And I don't mean solely programming now. I mean, we have got to make our websites a place that's welcoming, a place that is educational.
Hi there. Welcome back to another episode of the Conductor's podcast. Today's episode will be episode number 52. So exciting and happy August. I hope you are having a great time no matter where you are, if you're in the hot summer days or in the cold winter. My sister lives in New Zealand, so I'm always a little disoriented when she talks about weather or like when seeing her pictures with, heavy jackets and coat and scarves, sweaters, and all that. But no matter where you are, welcome back to today's episode. August is what I see a prepping month. August is when students are going back to school or like preparing to go back to school. Organizations preparing for the last nuts and bolts and all the last minute changes and franticness before the new season starts. Usually the new season starts in late September, and August is also when plans are being made, when decisions are being announced, new appointments, people leaving their positions. It's a lot of changes and a lot of excitement. So this is something that I really love. It's the time I feel when I can really sit down and be calm and prepping myself mentally and physically to start the new season. So for this month, we are going to talk about some different topics. The topics are commonly for things on the other side of the table from the conductor. What does that mean? So we are going to go into the structure of some of the performing arts organizations, about the other sides of studying conducting. How does teacher view conducting students, for example? How do organizations think about hiring? How do people navigate the pathway to the podium? Is conducting the only way of making an impact? Or there other side hustles or, side hustles turned business can actually be your calling? So that's what we're going to explore this August and have a great lineup of guest speakers, and that I'm so excited to introduce them to you. And my guest today is someone that I admire so much. Her name is Aubrey Bergauer, and she is probably best known as the former executive director of the California Symphony. When she was taking the lead of the organization, she helped that ensemble to double the size of its audience and nearly quadruple the donor base. After leaving her position with the California Symphony, she started a business called Changing the Narrative. And she helps clients and do consultants with different artistic disciplines, geographies, and budget up to hundreds of millions. I've heard about Aubrey's works years ago when I was doing research on audience engagement, because that was something that I was interested in, or I should say that's something that appealed to me when I first started working. That's something that could be my potential niche, because I love working with the audience member. I love to know how they are feeling or to understand if our performances are meeting them where they are. Compared to some of my colleagues or some of my teachers, they focus more on our own artistic pursuit. I was really interested in our ideas even well received. Our audience noticing what we're doing. Do they feel a difference when we do things differently? So I felt really strongly to really learn and research on my audience base. And her name came up a lot when I researched on a lot of different studies and, case studies of how different symphony orchestras and organizations do. So I am a longtime fan until I actually met her, met with the quotation marks online when she came to the Conductors Network for a talk. The Conductors Network was a series of webinars that were hosted by two friends of mine, Lena and Kenshel. So they were talking to different people during the pandemic, and Aubrey was one of the guests. So after hearing her talk with Lena and Kenshel, I just had that 5-second courage to message her. I sent her a message on Facebook saying, hey, I listened to your webinar and I was really amazed. I hope that we can connect sometime in the future. It took her a while to get back to me, which is normal. And I honestly didn't expect people getting back to me because a lot of people don't. But I was really thrilled to welcome her today to the Conductors podcast. And most importantly, we'll be talking about something that a lot of people don't want to talk about publicly: hiring. This is such an important thing that's missing or lacking in our training. I didn't get much help or support learning what are organizations looking for when they are hiring people. How do I make myself more desirable and preferable in the search process? I never learned it until I started working, and I was fortunate the search committee for a couple positions that opened up in my institution. And then I started to learn by errors, by making a lot of miserable mistakes. But today we have a lot of great things that we will be sharing with you, and she'll be talking about different strategies and also how organizations can change your hiring process to be more inclusive and welcoming. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation.
Hey, hello. Welcome to the show, Aubrey. I'm so glad to be talking to you, and thank you so much for coming to the Conductors podcast.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad to be finally speaking with you. And before we get started, do you mind telling my audience a little bit about your background, how you get to where you are right now?
Sure. Long story short, I have wanted to do arts management since I was in high school. But even then, I started out as a musician. I played the tuba. For anybody who doesn't know that about me, I do not look like a tuba player at all, but I really liked breaking the stereotypes, beating all the boys, all that kind of stuff, and became very serious about it and played in my youth orchestra hometown growing up, was one of those kids, won the concerto competition, then got into school, Rice, for college. And I knew I wanted to go there to double major because I could do the music performance degree as well as a business degree. And that set me on this path that I've been on ever since of really loving music. And I'm so appreciative that I have that training that professional musicians have, but also since day one have been so interested in the business side of what we do.
That's really interesting to hear because a lot of the people in arts management that I talk to would say they never thought they would come into it, or they was really focused to have a career as a musician first.
Yeah, I wish more of us would come to this place of realizing earlier on that, oh my gosh, there are so many roles not performing that are, in my opinion, just as important, because we need both. We need excellent performers and we need excellent people doing these offstage roles. And I say all the time now, we need our offstage talent to match our onstage talent. So yeah, I feel very strongly about this. And I should go on to say, to answer your question, my whole career since then has been in arts management. I started, the very quick bio is I started in Seattle at the Seattle Symphony in fundraising, then did several years at the Seattle Opera in marketing, joined the Bumbershoot Music and Arts Festival, first as the head of marketing and then promoted to the #2 there overall revenue. Then in 2014, I moved to California to take my first executive director job at the California Symphony. And that's where a lot of people came to know me and my work. I started doing a lot of things differently. I should say these things I started were at the other organizations too, but finally as an executive director was able to really put it all together. We saw our audience nearly double, donor base nearly quadruple. And then I started blogging about it. That really helped the orchestra rise in visibility and got a lot of attention for what we were doing. And then the last 3 years now, I have been helping other organizations achieve those same kind of results. So that's really that's the second half of your question, more of the bio for anybody who doesn't know me already.
Yeah, but as you say, I think a lot of people get to know you because of your role with the California Symphony, which is such a unusual thing, I think, back then, because I think like people were a little aware of our models not working. And I remember I had a seminar when I was in grad school. That's more than 10 years ago. We talked to someone who was probably like you. Like, I think I remember she was not a general manager, but she manages maybe like one little part. I think was outreaching. She came in to talk to us, and she said she was a horn player first, and then she stumbled into it, and then like talk about conductors, about things that we were not aware, or like we never were thinking about. But I was just like really curious, with those many roles, do you have a favorite? Do you like marketing or fundraising development, or do you like the general everything?
Yeah, I think the answer is everything, but I'll try to give you a more nuanced answer than that. I think, because actually that's not true. As soon as I said that, now I'm like, wait, you don't love everything, Aubrey. What are you talking about? Okay, let's be real. Let's be honest here. Okay, let's pick it apart. When I worked in fundraising, what I really liked is working with people who love the art, because they're donating. They're the most bought in, literally the most bought in people we have in our orbit. So I really enjoyed that piece of it. Then when I went to the Seattle Opera and was working in marketing, then I was like, no, I love this like challenge of how do we bring people into the fold? How do we convert people at the other end of the spectrum who, I mean, ticketing encompasses a lot of different levels of knowledge and sort of affinity to the organization. But I really enjoyed that idea of how do we move somebody from consideration to purchase to eventually hopefully becoming a subscriber, earlier on in that patron journey. So I really like that. And I have become fascinated along the way with not just consumer behavior, but also organizational psychology. And that gets into this idea of, this goes back to where I was thinking everything, because it became clear to me that it's not just be good at marketing, be good at fundraising, be good at programming, be good at education, all these different departments that we have. It became clear to me, no, that's not sufficient to have high performing organizations. It is about our company culture. It is about how do we structure our teams? How do we manage others in a way that develops a place of psychological safety? And so I became way more interested as my career progressed in these overarching issues. And I mean, I just was so eager to finally get my first executive director job, because not that you can't make change wherever you are, because I firmly believe that no matter our role, no matter our level of seniority, we definitely contribute to culture setting and all of those types of things. However, it comes from the top. And so that's why I said everything. Because I was thinking it all comes together. It all, you put it all together. But I'm getting long-winded. But what I would say is I am probably the least interested in programming, which maybe sounds weird to say on a podcast for conductors, but I say that intentionally here to say that I really believe in trusting my artistic partner to be the brains behind that. And partnership is so critical in that to me. Because I have the performance degree, I can talk repertoire all day long, and I'm happy that I have the skill set to be that partner, but I'm not one to tinker with that. I really believe in working with my music director, artistic planning personnel to do those kinds of things. So there you go. That's a lot. It turns out I don't love everything.
Yeah, that's what happens to my guests a lot. Like when I ask a question, they would start elaborating, and then they found out some more things about themselves too. But since you brought up programming, I'm really curious about your thoughts, because we hear a lot of notions, like you have to program a certain repertoire, especially for orchestras, to attract or to retain your certain donor, because they have a very specific taste or artistic expectations. Do you find that to be true, or do you feel that if you can sell, you can sell anything?
Oh, I think pieces of that are true. So just because I don't love programming doesn't mean I don't have opinions on it. So here we go. Here's the soapbox on this. This is a general statement about our industry. So we tend to program in silos. We do the pops concerts here. We do the quote unquote classical core repertoire concerts here. We do our Black History Month concert, our Chinese New Year concert, right? We tend to very much program in silos. And that is starting to shift a little bit. We're seeing more integrated programs, but what I found in the research that I've done, I said I become fascinated with consumer behavior. What I found is that doesn't match buyer behavior. So yes, when we do a culturally specific concert, for example, yes, Chinese audiences will come to the Chinese New Year concert. We know that, but they don't come back to other things because we're not programming for that group of people. So similarly, we want millennials to come and Gen Z. So we do Harry Potter in concert or the movie concerts or whatever, but they don't come to anything else. So it's not that programming in silos doesn't work. Those concerts sell. It's that they don't come back to other things. And that is problematic for developing the loyal audiences we need, which then are our top prospects for donors. This is why all these different areas really come together in my mind. So programming, in my opinion, we got to break down the silos. It is all good music. It is all good music. And it all needs to be represented consistently throughout our seasons. And when we do that, what's so interesting, you do that and you combine it with strong marketing, which I can happy to talk more about if you want, but then that starts to liberate us artistically on what we put on stage, because it becomes less about beholden to, oh, I need a blockbuster in this slot. Okay, fine, put in Brahms or Beethoven because we got to sell the tickets. It liberates us instead to say, no, we program great music throughout the season. That great music, that definition is broad. We mix everything together because that is truly representative of what the canon is and should be, could be. So hopefully that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because because as you say, and then we know it, we just don't want to talk about it because, we have sold out concerts for a certain pops or for, the dress up and for whatever, for the kids concerts, but they don't come back for other things. When you play Sibelius, they don't come to your Sibelius concert. But in your experience, I know traditionally we kind of think those are two separate groups of audiences. There's our patron that's very royal, and then there's new people that we need to get and then maybe have them subscribe, maybe progress them into the donor. I know you've done a lot of research. How difficult is that to transform a first-time concert goer into a loyal patron?
It's very difficult when under the current way we typically do things. And we just touched on some of this. People come once, they don't come again. The statistic for orchestras is that 90% of first-time attendees don't ever come back again. 9 out of 10 first-timers never come back. That is so alarming. That statistic has existed pre-pandemic for about 10 years. Definitely true now, where audiences are even less loyal post-pandemic than before. The way we've been doing it all these years is not working. What do we do instead, to your question? So instead, we have to change the experience. And I don't mean solely programming now. I mean, we have got to make our websites a place that's welcoming, a place that is educational. So many orchestra websites talk about the beloved Elgar concerto, or I don't know, whatever. Most people don't know probably all three of those words. Okay, people know beloved, but what does that mean? Elgar, a lot of people are like, who's that? Don't care. Concerto, what's that? I mean, this is the level of music education we have in America now, where people don't know words like concerto. And there's no shame in that. It's just acknowledging that and saying, okay, because most people in life aren't music majors, because public education in America has changed so much over the last few decades, public music education, that is, instead, we have got to be in the business of educating our audiences. So let's talk about, why did we program that piece of music? What's interesting about it? What was happening in Elgar's life when he wrote that? What was happening in the world around us? Those are things that are very interesting. We all learned it in music history in school. So we got to help other people learn it too, in a way that is, bite-sized, informative, that kind of thing. And we found, definitely at the California Symphony, and then since then with other clients I've worked for, when we become in the business of education in that way, then audiences say, oh, okay, I come here because I learned something. I feel welcomed. I don't feel intimidated. These are feeling intimidated is a huge, huge emotion we've learned from the audiences we've done research and interviews with. So breaking that down, so that people say, oh no, I get it. When I come, I get it. I understand why we put that on stage. I understand what I'm supposed to wear. I understand when to applaud. When we fill in those types of gaps, then audiences have a better experience. You combine that with the great art that's on stage. Our musicians are so good. We deliver excellent performances. The music has never been the problem. That's very clear in all the research. So you start putting all that together, then they feel welcomed. They feel unintimidated. Then they feel awe during the performance. Then we're inviting them to come back again. And that is when we start seeing a shift of, it's not 9 out of 10 don't come back. It's we get more of those people to come back again. And that's the answer to your question of how do we start building more loyal audiences? It all starts with getting somebody to come back a second time. Because last thing, and then I'll stop going on and on about this, but last thing on this is we do know from years of data in the field, if we can just get somebody to come back for a second visit within 12 months of their first visit, their lifetime value, lifetime loyalty skyrockets. We tend to overweight, we need subscribers, we need donors. Yes, of course, we need those things. But if we don't get people to come back from a first timer to a second timer, those other things can't happen.
That is excellent. And I wanted to ask those questions because I know those are very important parts of your work and how you do things differently to kind of lay a ground of what I wanted to ask later. So as you described, this is a different emphasis because now we are talking about the audience experience from the moments they click on your website or from they see your Facebook ad or whatever. Then it's a different kind of thing as opposed to before, which is, okay, we are just going to play the best repertoire or the focus is different. But it's certainly a different cultural from within. You need to have a different set of mindset for your staff, from your artistic staff and administrative, and how do you change from within? That's a big question, I know.
Yeah, it's a big question. It's such an important question too. How do we change? Well, as I said before, we can all be part of setting culture in our organizations. What's coming to mind immediately that goes hand in hand with what we were just talking about is we don't tend to label ourselves as elitist. We know that's a label we get sometimes from outside. So a different word for it is we do act in some ways. Again, I'm painting with a very broad brush, but many of us in many organizations, the internal culture is a culture of information is almost weaponized. Like who has the deepest knowledge of fill in the blank? And we revere that. And there's a bunch of reasons why that is. I think that has to do so much with just the lineage of musical training and I don't know, and probably inferiority complexes maybe come into that too. But, this is stuff that is not serving us now in 2022. And so instead of, it's not to say we don't value deep knowledge and we don't value people who have such broad range and depth of understanding of our art form. It's not that we don't value that. It's that for too long, we have devalued anybody who doesn't fit in that category. And that matters because when we're talking about this conversation of experience, creating a place where patrons feel like they belong, most of them don't have that knowledge. And that goes right back to what I was saying about, because we don't teach it in our public school system anymore. So we have to be people who say, that's okay. We want to share knowledge with you. And sharing knowledge doesn't mean you open the program book and read words like concerto or instrumentation. Like we learned that a lot of grown adults don't even know all the names of the instruments in the orchestra. When I realized that was unfathomable to me because I don't remember not knowing all the names of the instruments in the orchestra, right? So, it's just like that's the level that we're dealing with a lot of times. And like I said, no shame in that. We have to identify that and say, okay, if that's where smart, high achieving Americans are, and that's our prospect for ticket buyers, then we've got to meet them there. So that culture starts within is what I'm trying to say. And we've got to be people who say, no, we're going to hire people who don't have a deep level of expertise. There are certain roles where that's necessary. Anybody in artistic planning obviously needs to have a very deep knowledge of the repertoire, artistry, anybody in personnel management, obviously. But some of these other roles, we don't have to have such deep knowledge everywhere. I don't know if that sounds radical as I say it or not. I've definitely worked in places, some of the organizations I've named already, where that wasn't welcome. And that's a mistake, I think.
Yeah, I certainly feel how you said. I still remember the moment when I was reminded not everyone, even musicians, can recognize the different sound of each instrument. I remember listening to a piece with some friends, some are musicians, some are not, and then I say something about, oh, that flute sound was beautiful or something like that. They're like, oh, you can tell that was a flute from other instruments? I say, of course. And then that hit me. I was like, oh, not everyone like know the name of the instrument first, and then two, be able to tell. So when you say, oh, listen to the flute, that might mean nothing to them. Or listen to
Exactly.
this trombone, they might not be able to differentiate from a trumpet or from a tuba or from euphonium and other things.
Right. Yeah. Which is so important because those same people, like this is what the research I've done has shown now from multiple organizations, those same people will hear a performance and say, oh my God, it was so good. But sometimes it's just hard for them to articulate more specifically. Yeah. Was it the trombone? Was it right. So we just have to be aware of that and know, like, we know our art is so strong, but not everybody can talk about it and articulate it in the way that we can.
Of course. And as you described your experience, like when you were working on only part of the puzzle, say like in marketing or in development or other things, then it's harder to make more holistic changes. But then we understand that when you have a position open up, that's a chance to bring in new blood, to bring in different people. But it's also hard for organizations to really get out of their comfort zone to find someone who might not be traditionally fit. Or how can we encourage organizations, or like how can we make hiring more exciting and more diverse?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. This question is so important. I've been thinking about it so much lately, but really over recent multiple years, I should say. But right now it feels very top of mind because we do have so many openings and the great resignation and great reshuffle is upon us. Here's what I've learned. I have read so much research on how do we hire well, and it comes down to a few things. We have got to start with the skills that we need. And too often we don't. Here's what normally happens in administrative roles. Somebody's leaving, they put in their notice, semi-panic, thinking, oh my God, we got to fill this role because there's so much work to do. True, been there, felt that. Then we dig up the job description from last time and say, okay, it's kind of evolved in this way and this way. We make some changes, we make some tweaks, and then like pretty much as quickly as we can, get it up online to be posting the position to hire somebody new. Okay. Maybe it doesn't happen exactly like that everywhere, but wow, I have seen it happen like that or a version of that many, many, many times. Okay. And then when we get on the phone and start doing our first round interviews or phone screens or whatever, however we're starting that process, then it becomes a exercise in who feels like they are the right fit, who went to the right school, who's worked at the right orchestras or opera companies before, and have they had that title before, and that sort of a thing. All the research says basically everything I just said is wrong in terms of trying to find the best, truly best talent available across the full spectrum of all kinds of different backgrounds, ethnicities, sexual orientations. I mean, every way you can define gender, every way you can define diversity. All the research says everything I just said is pretty much the worst way we could do it. So what do we do instead? Okay. Research says we need to, instead of the knee-jerk reaction of dig up the last job description, research says we need to start with a skills list. What is actually needed for this role? And that really matches some of the things we were saying before of, okay, what roles is a deep knowledge of the repertoire necessary? Some roles that is necessary. Many roles I would even contend, probably not. So what is actually necessary? If it's a marketing role, like, do they need to know search engine optimization? Do they need to know digital marketing? And more specifically, do they need to know like content marketing on Instagram in 2022 or, whatever? Like, let's get real specific here. What are the actual skills needed? Sometimes I remember there was one time at California Symphony, we were going through this exercise and somebody on my team was hiring somebody else. And they said, this is so typical. The job description said, you must be proficient in Microsoft Office suite or something like that. And I said, well, what is it they actually need to know how to do for this role? And this is a very entry-level role. And they were like, oh, they need to be able to do mail merge. They need to be able to do mail merge so we can send out our donor thank you letters and other things that we use mail merge for. And I said, okay, then put in the job description, you need to know mail merge, not Microsoft Office. Like, that means that's just too broad, right? I'm like, what if somebody's like, great, I'm a PowerPoint expert. And it's like, well, that's not going to help us. So anyways, very specific on what are the actual skills we need. And from there, then we can flow that into a job description. I'm getting very long-winded about this. It's just so fundamental to hiring people who actually have the chops to do with what we need. Then we need to develop questions that elicit who has those skills. So I'll try to pick up the pace here. The research says we need to ask behavioral questions. Behavioral means, tell me about a time when you used mail merge in a past job and what did you do? Okay, somebody either has an answer to that. Oh, I did this, and then I did these steps, and then I attached the Excel spreadsheet as the data source. And you're like, okay, this person understands mail merge. Or you can tell they're like, oh, well, I haven't quite done that before, but I did, blah, 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 blah. You can really tell who has that skill and who doesn't when you ask behavioral questions. Because, and the reason why this is called predictive validity, that means past behavior is the most important indicator of future behavior. That's why you ask questions about what has somebody done in the past. So there's a lot of other things the research goes on to say. What if you're interviewing for a new skill set and somebody hasn't done that thing anymore? Okay, there are things you can do. What would you do? But that's not the best predictor. If possible, it needs to be these, tell me about a time when. Past behavior is best predictor of future behavior. Okay. Other than that, I'll just say very quickly in terms of the diversity piece, we have got to be better at making sure the first round candidate pool is representative, is diverse. If not, go back to the resume stack or resume inbox and see who else can we bring into that first pool. It's got to be more than tokenism. We can't have one person from an underrepresented group and call that diverse. All the research says that actually makes them an outsider and other because they're the only one. So anyways, I could go on and on and on, but if we just did some of those things that I just articulated, that alone would radically change our hiring process. Oh, and I got to say one more, ask the same questions in the same order to everybody who comes through for every interview round. This is also very important for consistency, meaning fair and equitable hiring. All right. I really could go on and on and on, but I hope this helps shed some light. And I care so much about this because, as I said, we have such an opportunity right now. We have so many open positions right now. And if we say as institutions we champion DEI, then we need to change our hiring practices to match what we're saying.
This is wonderful. And then I just want to say a lot of the companies that I know would just do a workshop, like a DEI workshop that actually brings up nothing. I've taken some of those courses. Like you have to do an online course to do DEI trainings. They actually teach you nothing, unfortunately. But I have some follow-up questions. So coming back from the last, so you say it's about equity, that you have to ask the same question in the same order, but are follow-up questions allowed? So like if they answer one of the questions and then one of the committee has a question to ask the candidates to elaborate on that, is that allowed or should that be avoided?
That's a good question. I'll tell you what's coming to mind right now. I think if the follow-up questions are to gain a better understanding, you're not sure did the answer really articulate if they have that skill set or not. Okay, can you tell me more about that? What happened when you were starting the mail merge? Or I don't know, I keep using that as the same example, but I think if it's really to elicit greater understanding of do they have the skill, I would imagine that's okay. If it's a leading follow-up question, yeah, no, not so much, because that's not equitable and not something we're going to be asking a leading question to every candidate. That would be not equitable. That's my sense on follow-up questions.
And we'll come back to leading questions because they are awful.
Yeah.
But another question I had, so I just wanted to have some clarification on the second point that you made about behavioral questions. Are they about the skill sets that you describe in the first one, like what this one is really about? Or because we're seeing some samples, when you Google it, there are some sample interview questions such as, oh, can you give us an example of you solving a conflict? I hate those questions, to be honest. Like, are those good questions? Or like, can you tell us an example of you failing and then you restart something? Would those consider like behavioral questions?
I love that you're asking this. We tend to be too broad in our questions. So if we ask a question in an interview, like, tell me about a time when you resolved a conflict, why are we asking that? What goes back to what is the skill we're interviewing for? Let's say I'm interviewing somebody to be a music director, right? We've got a lot of conductors here listening. I would say, what's the skill I need? Yeah, a music director does need to be pretty good at conflict resolution, but okay, let's push on that. What is it specifically? Oh, maybe I'm making this up. Maybe they need to be good at, I don't know, working with a principal player on what they think should happen in a melodic line versus what the conductor thinks should happen. Okay, then I would say, tell me about a time when you were working with a principal player and you had different approaches to a melodic line of music. How did you resolve that? That's what I would say, because that's actually getting at the specific skill I'm trying to interview for. So hopefully that adds some nuance, because if you just ask, tell me about a time of conflict resolution, they'll say, well, I was talking to the board chair and it's like, or, whatever. And it's like, that doesn't help me. I've got plenty of other questions for a music director candidate about how they work with the board, but I'm just saying, if like in my mind, I'm trying to get at this other scenario, then let's ask about that other scenario specifically.
So since we talk about that, so like coming back to the other side of the table, because I assume like a lot of people listening will be more often on the other side as an applicant or interviewees, when you're being asked very non-specific questions, or sometimes even worse, the committees don't seem to really know what they are looking for. That happens a lot, unfortunately, or they are trying to learn that as well. They might not be as skilled in interviewing or hiring. That happens a lot too. How can you navigate that better to really kind of bring yourself, like kind of you want to be the best candidates you can be, but also helping to navigate that situation from the other side?
Yeah, that's also such a great question. So strategic. I love it. So, because you're right, everybody on the other side isn't always doing the interviews this way. So then I would say, how do we help them? How do we help figure out what they're looking for so we can give the answers that help them evaluate if we're the right fit? Let's say, we can use the same example. If we get a broad question, how do you handle conflict resolution? We could say in the interview, oh, yeah, great question. There's a lot of different types of conflict resolution. Are you thinking, or several examples come to mind? Are you wanting to hear about when I've worked with the board, or when I've worked with players, or when I am working with my executive director counterpart? Like, ask that back. And then what's brilliantly strategic about this is you also learn from that hiring committee what they want. Oh, yeah, we're actually talking about with musicians, because sometimes in our orchestra, we've had some challenges with that in the past, and they just really were head to head with the music director and it caused some problems. And you're like, oh, in your brain, you should be like, ding, ding, ding. That is good intel for me to know coming into this role. And then you can obviously answer their question. Why, yes, here are times when I've dealt with that kind of situation before. That's what I would suggest. Be the one to make it go specific, because you are gathering so much good intel about that organization. And then also giving them better answers back so they can evaluate, oh, yeah, they do have the chops to do that.
So I wanted to move back a little bit, because we've been talking about interviews for the past few minutes, but we know that before you get to the interview stage, there's the paper round, I call them. You have to pass a certain screening or reviewing to get to that stage, while committees or like each organization does it differently. Sometimes you have one or two or however many people looking at your material. From the organization's perspective, how can they assure, like as you said, the first round pool is diverse, and then also once they have a diverse pool, it's sometimes really difficult to compare apples and oranges, like for some of them, like be understanding with the implicit bias, like different groups have different training, and how can we promote diversity and then really remind everyone to not to fall back to the, we need someone that loves classical music so they can do the job. No, someone actually knowing marketing can also do the job, or someone knows the targeted audience very well can do the job well too.
Yeah, I would say it goes back to, like I said, we are looking for skills and knowing not what to look for too. We are not looking for the names of the organizations they worked for in the past. It tells me nothing if they worked for fill in the blank big orchestra. What were they? It also tells me nothing what their title was before. Okay, they were a previous marketing manager. That doesn't mean they were a good marketing manager. Oh, they were over all subscriptions. Were they any good at being over all subscriptions? I mean, so we've got to, again, just skills, skills, skills. And how do we ask somebody, okay, tell me, what were the subscription sales when you started the job and what were the subscription sales 2 years in or whatever? Okay, that's going to tell us, did they grow subscriptions or not? Right? Okay. And then as a candidate, we should be designing our resumes that way too. Like, let's put in benchmarks that show we delivered results. That's important as a candidate. So I think of that. If I'm thinking more artistically, this is important too. It's not just what school did they go to? Yes, we love seeing those shiny top conservatories. And also, there are great musicians who didn't go to those shiny top conservatories. So I'm not saying if you went to fill in the blank school, you're not in the first round. It's saying, okay, how else do we broaden this? Because not everybody fits that cookie cutter mold. So there's that. There's being intentional. If we are, let's get real specific here since I'm talking about being specific. We know in symphony orchestras in America, 1% to 2% of musicians are Black. So if we know we want to hire more Black musicians because we say DEI is a priority and we care about this issue, then what are we doing when we post the job for the opening and we get in all these resumes, hundreds probably, and we need to look and see, okay, we whittled it down. Now let's look at the ethnicity of that person, the race of that person, or that pool. If we have 1% to 2% of those candidates as Black, let's go back to the stack and say, are there any others we can invite? That's a good one too. Not just invited because they submitted their resume. Who else do we invite? We invite people to auditions all the time. So let's be intentional about inviting excellent Black and brown musicians that we know exist in our marketplace to come take that audition. Like, we stack the deck all the time for auditions. So let's stack it in a way that helps us achieve these broader goals we're trying to achieve. That's something we can do. One more thing on musicians, let's look at our sublists. That's a big place we pull from for any kind of opportunity. So let's make sure our sublists aren't completely homogenous, right? So anyways, those are ways that I think we can get at broadening that candidate pool, who we're considering, whether an offstage role or an onstage role.
Definitely. I think kind of going back to the roots, you want to invite more people. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable applying since a lot of the organization, it's much easier and quicker if you just go to the resume and look at the names. And that's unfortunate. But applicants, you have strategies. You can put out actual results. That's one way of doing it. And your experience hiring and also coaching your clients, how important is cover letter? Because that's a way you can say something about you other than just the resume or LinkedIn pages. How can other things come in and help?
Yeah. So say it again, LinkedIn. And then what was the first one you said? How important?
Cover letter.
Oh, cover letter. Okay.
Very website.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. These are all tools that we have at our disposal as candidates for sure. So cover letter, what we do too often as candidates is either regurgitate things that are in the resume or this is the bigger one I see all the time when hiring. Candidates tend to talk about why the job is good for them. I'm the perfect fit for this job because blah, 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 blah. This job is so great because I love insert city. Maybe those things sound normal because I've done that in cover letters before I learned all of this. Instead, we have to talk about them. Wow, whatever the job is, wow, XYZ orchestra, go to their website, do the homework. You all are embedded in your community. You all are, I'm sorry to say this, but blow a little sunshine if you want. As a strategic candidate, do your research, say this, but because it shows you've done your homework, even if you know that, you know what I mean? So hopefully this is coming across as strategic and not inauthentic. But we've got to tell the organization that we know about them. We've done our homework. Same thing with the role. So that's important. It's about them, not about us, because the person reading that just the psychology behind it is that it really starts to resonate. Also important to say, and this is very authentic, I've learned this over the years in working with a coach. We've got to be able to articulate our own sound bites about our impact. So it goes back to delivering results. So it's not just if the resume is like, oh, I increased the budget X%. Okay, great. That's great for the resume. For the cover letter, I would say it differently. I would say some other sort of impact statement, which I'm trying to think, we practice these things, we get better at them all the time. We have to think of them. But, I have my sound bites I use all the time. I'm changing the narrative. The Steve Jobs of classical music, all these things that are in my bio, I want to start putting that. I use technology to elevate and extend the brand. Those are words that not every candidate would say, but Aubrey Bergauer would say. And so it's kind of the combination of that. It's about them as the organization. And then also, when we are talking about ourselves, these very specific impact statements that are unique to us, that really speak to our mark on the world, how we move through the world. And the combination of those two means your cover letter is unlike anybody else's. And that's how you stand out.
And a lot of people will ask this question, especially for conductors, how important is the website? And especially for people just like finishing study, of course, you won't have a lot of great things. You go to workshops, you finish schools, that's all you can talk about. And is it still worth putting on a website or a LinkedIn page or like social media? How important do they come into a hiring process in your experience?
Yeah, I think for a conductor or guest artist, soloist, anything like that, the website is important. It's part, that's how we're looking people up, right? So that is important. But it's not just have a website, because here's the thing. So many conductor websites, singer websites, they look by and large the same. So it's like the same strategy I just said with the cover letter, put that on the website. So instead of you go to the website, photo of artist, hands outstretched, baton in their hand, and then bio page with 1,000 words or more, like, don't do that. What if instead, and I don't mean to hate on the pictures of conductors, but what if instead it's, I don't know, what does a conductor care about? I don't know, pick something that feels so authentic to you. Is there an image that can capture that? Is there something that just really a big photo that captures your essence that you could put on the homepage? Like, try that, look different. And instead of the bio being just the list of all the places you've performed, it's fine to highlight a few, the ones we're proud of course, that's part of our accomplishments. But instead of, well, they performed here in New York and then here in Paris and then here and it's like, okay, at some point I'm falling asleep reading this. Instead, like I said, sprinkle some of that in, but also, like, what if your first statement, I'm making this up, somebody's first statement was, when a patron tells me they came out of the concert hall different than when they arrived, I live for that. That's not a statement about your musicality. I mean, it is, but not so on the nose, right? Instead of, the first sentence with an MM and blah, 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 and a DMA and blah, 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 like, it's such a different, it provokes an emotional reaction. I hope that helps a little bit of like, what are these things we can say out of the gate that when somebody reads that, they say, oh, that's not the same as everybody else.
This is so great. I'm taking notes.
Good. I love it. I hope it's hard to speak in broad terms about this because it is so unique to all of us. So I hope it's helpful.
Yeah. And then another question that a lot of people might ask or might be curious about is, so from both sides or either side, where does agent come into play? I know a lot of times, say a music director search might be closed, that they only work with recommended people, or they go through agents, or when they're hiring soloists or a singer, they start with the agents they know. It might not be a diverse pool per se, or should artists, musicians be trying to get to the better agent to have better connections? I know that's like a big question.
Yeah, this is so tough. Okay, I'll start with what's not helpful. I've met too many artists over the years who think if I just get an agent, I'll have work lined up forever. That's not true. Okay, that's thing one. Thing two is for artists who do have an agent, oh my gosh, every person making either artistic decisions, whether that's music director or artistic planning staff, or also true for executive directors, get bombarded with agents all the time. And I know they're trying to do their jobs, but wow, it is like I am so calloused to emails from most agents. And so as artists, everybody needs to know that. So it's not to say we don't need agents. That's not true. There's an important job to be done there. Instead, it's how do we kind of take everything else we've talked about and put it into this part of the conversation? Let's think, for example, if there's a music director search and maybe it's closed and the agent on your behalf is going to reach out. Maybe they say, go back to those sound bites. When Xiaowen conducts, patrons say, I had a transformative experience. I don't know. Like I said, I'm totally making this up. I don't know if that soundbite resonates with you, but like whatever those things are that really are those authentic like pieces of our impact in the world. What if the agent said that when they reached out? Not, I have a conductor I'd like to share with you. Like boring, So that's what I recommend on that is, again, just how do we use just different language to describe what we achieve and how you make a unique dent in the world. That gives you a better chance, I would say, or the agent a better chance of breaking through.
And I can only imagine how many emails you get from agents or from artists reaching out. But I know that happens to you every day. But how do you feel about people sending cold emails or just trying to make connections? You even read those emails? I'm not going to ask if you reply them because I don't always myself.
It's hard when somebody says like, here's my latest recording of blah, blah, blah. Honestly, delete immediately. I'm not sitting around thinking, wow, I wish I had more recordings to listen to. So, but instead, if somebody reaches out, this goes right back to like the cover letter advice. If somebody reaches out and says, Aubrey, I've been following your work. What you did on XYZ really made a difference to me or whatever. And then I'm like, oh, why? Thank you. Okay. Now I'm listening, so it's the same advice of like, talk about them, not yourself, not here's my recording or an agent saying, here's the new recording. It's talking about the person on the other end or the organization on the other end. That starts to capture attention in a different way. And then it's just like, I feel maybe like I'm repeating myself, but it's not, I'm not going to listen to the recording and then decide for myself, oh, that is an excellent artist. That's just not what maybe hopefully artistic personnel are doing this more than I am in particular. But also true, though, is that there is a lot of noise. There is a lot of that stuff being sent around. So instead, if somebody's reaching out to me, like I said, starting with me or starting with the organization, that's great. And then also going back to that like soundbite language, that impact language. It's the same thing's true for this cold outreach is what I'm trying to say of like, oh, I don't know. It just like helps you stand out in a way that it's like, okay, I'm not going to listen to the recording, but I am now interested in kind of understanding more about what this person's about.
That is excellent. And yes, as you say, like I got emails with composers saying, hey, this is my newest composition. Take a look. Or it's like, who are you? why do I want to even like
I was
open and read?
to look through more scores today. Thank you. Just kidding.
But as you mentioned soundbite a couple of times, and I know that's a skill that you have to practice and get better. So for someone who is just starting to build their soundbite or trying to find their impact, or like when you're just out of school, you're like, oh, I'm going to be great and save the world. Like, where would you recommend starting, or even with some exercise steps that they can start practicing?
Yeah, great question. Practically where you can start, this is where LinkedIn comes back into play. Start on LinkedIn. This is such a tool we have at our disposal, free, obviously available to us. Use that, what's it called? Like that header space at the top, like the description or summary or whatever they call it. And instead of insert bio sentence of what school you went to or what orchestra or whatever, start with a statement that's like about your impact on the world. Try it. See what happens. You get more views on your profile, although having that would become after the profile view. I don't know. Do more people reach out? Do more people, I don't know. Try it on even actually social media is a brilliant place to start trying this. As people are posting online, what's that first sentence you write when you post that photo? Just try using different words and see, does that post get more interaction? That's an awesome way to start really experimenting with these sound bites that you're trying to find for yourself, because you get real-time feedback in like a zero cost, zero threatening environment, right? It's a social media post, like fine, 24 hours later, nobody's looking at it anymore. So it's fine if it's not effective. So anyways, very easy to test that way. What else? In terms of trying to find those sound bites, advice that's been given to me, anybody wanting more on this, look up Catherine Martin. She's been really helpful to me in this. But exercises you can do are like, you're trying to figure out, what is my impact in the world? Well, start with a sentence and then, ask yourself, like a 2-year-old or 3-year-old, why? Or what happens when I do that? What happens when I do that? If you do that like 8 times, 10 times, the sentence you end up with is going to be very different. What happens when I get on the podium? I conduct music. What happens when I do that? Okay, I don't know. For different people, different responses will start to flow. If you do that like 8 times, 10 times, drill down, like I said, that end sentence is going to be so different than I get on the podium. So try those kind of exercises. And I think it's very hard. I'm not going to lie. I struggle with this so much personally. I'm very transactional. I'm very data driven. So to push myself, I'm constantly trying to get better at it because I'm not naturally great at it. But that's an example of an exercise we can do.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to hear that you had to practice on that, because in my mind, you're just the great superstar that you know how to do it.
Oh, well, that's a very nice compliment, because I want you to think that.
I would never imagine that you had to go through exercise, because I've been following you, and as I said in my email reaching out to you, I first met you virtually when you came to talk with Leonardo and Kensho. Both are my friends for many, many years. But I was like, oh, she's brilliant. She has great things to say. And then everything is kind of catchy. And I was like, oh, I've never thought of things that way. Or, whoa, that's like really true. But I didn't even think about this. So that was like kind of my general impression of our first encounter. Even though it's kind of one way, but that really just relieved me. Oh, she needed practice too. Yes.
That means a lot. No, I definitely practice. Actually, I will say anytime, like public is a total aside, but public speaking, I practice much like practicing an instrument. You don't just run it through. You work on the spots that are transitions. You work on the spots that are giving you trouble, right? Like practice slow, or like it's actually remarkably similar in many ways. So there we go. Advice for everybody who has some public speaking as part of their job as well.
I think that's all conductors. I would like to remind everyone, every rehearsal you're doing is an occasion for public speaking. Yes. Even though we don't think about that.
100% agree. Yeah.
Yeah. But just to wrap up our conversation, and I wanted to thank you so much for sharing all the experience and insights. It's such a great time talking to you. But I know you're so passionate about changing the narrative, and what can we do as individuals to help you or to help any organizations? Where should we start?
Thank you for asking that. I'll say a couple things in response. One is do something, not nothing. I mean, if there's anything in this conversation that made your ears perk up, anybody listening, anything that made you think differently, as you were just describing, oh, I never thought about it that way. Like, do something in response. Don't just think other people, quote unquote, are going to figure it out and take care of it, because I'm much better about this now, but there have been way too many times in my career where I've thought that, oh, I need to wait until I'm more senior in my career. I need to wait to be able to do fill in the blank. I need to wait until I have more years experience under my belt. I need to wait, whatever the thing is where I'm thinking like I'm not there yet. That's garbage. You are there because you're thinking about it now, and that matters. And so don't wait. Whatever it is, do something, not nothing. And anytime I have followed that advice for myself, I've been grateful. I'm like, wow, why was I ever worried about taking the step? I mean, so many things at the California Symphony were like that too, where I thought, oh, maybe I need to wait until I'm at a bigger organization. Maybe I need to fix our budget problems and then start trying new things. It doesn't work like that. We don't fix our budget problems if we do things the way they've always been done. Anyway, so all of this is to say, whatever the hesitation is, say, no. I'm here. It's now. I'm ready to do something, even if it's a small baby step. So that's thing one. Thing two, I will say, is the narrative is changing. That's what I'm now saying. In 2022, I'm saying it's not just changing the narrative, it's the narrative is changing. And this is such good news for all of us in classical music that maybe change isn't fast enough for a lot of us. And I definitely hear that. But the things we are talking about as an industry now are definitely different than 2 years ago, 3 years ago, definitely 5 years ago. I mean, the shift is happening in so many ways. Again, maybe not as fast as we want, I know, but it is changing. So insert ourselves into that conversation, into that movement now, because it is upon us. So those are the two things I would say. The narrative is changing, and then don't wait. Do whatever it is, do it now.
This is awesome. Thank you so much. I'll put this in the show notes, but I wanted my listeners to hear it from you. Where can they find you to reach out? Do you mind sharing your website or social media handles?
Yes, thank you. Please, Aubrey Bergauer on every social media channel, at Aubrey Bergauer on Instagram, LinkedIn for sure. I have always posting a lot there. Those are my top two channels. Twitter, less and less, I would say, to be honest. My website, aubreybergauer.com. So please look me up, follow me. I'd love to connect with you all online.
And please do. She has a lot of great things that she shares, her blog posts, and also like even just the social media bites. I love all the videos that you've been posting. They were so great. And thank you so much again for coming here.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. It's been a blast.
Here you go, my friends. And what's your biggest takeaway from today's episode? I hope you found it as such a great jam, just as I did. I loved every single conversation that I had with Aubrey, and she shared so many important things so genuinely. And if you missed episode number 5, I would encourage you to go back and listen or check out the show notes, because in episode number 5, I shared 3 tips of writing a killer cover letter. And I gave you examples of how you can change the way of telling what you want to telling the organization why they need you. Talk about them, not you. Because, even when I was looking through fellowship or, job applications, I have a lot of candidates telling me how great conductors they are, which prestige institution they went to, which famous teacher they studied with. Everybody had something like that. So why am I choosing you over the other person? Why am I curious about knowing more about you? That's the key. You want people to get curious about you, so you would get an invitation for an interview, right? You wanted to talk about them, not you. Tell them what problems they have and what can you help them to solve those problems, or what skill set, what extra things that you're bringing to this position. And you want to invoke their emotional feelings. They want to be curious about you. They want to be thinking that you're a potential great colleague or a potential great conductor to work with. You want to tell a story that's relevant and really, really relatable. So 1, talk about them, not you. 2, invoke some emotional reactions. And 3, tell a story. Don't give just a lot of facts or a laundry list of where you've studied, which orchestras you might have conducted before, which teacher you worked with. Don't do that. And I also love what she said about how we can be more inclusive as organizations. I know some of my listeners might not be at the position of gatekeeper or even on the search committee of hiring someone, but you might have more power than you thought. You might have power hiring teacher A over teacher B for a string sectional. If you need a sub when you are going away, you have the power over conductor X or conductor Y to sub for you. Make sure that you really think about those steps that Aubrey just shared. Think about the real skill sets that you need. If you need someone to be able to run a rehearsal with young musicians, young kids, then don't say that you want someone that can conduct Held 11, right? Someone being able to jump in and conduct I Held 11 with no rehearsal might not be the best candidate to work with very young musicians when they are still struggling with the positions. They don't know which strings to use. They don't know their bow strokes, and they don't understand bow disciplines. You might want a conductor with string backgrounds, for example. So really think about what are the skill sets you need and be really intentional with the invitation. Look for minorities. Look for people who might not have seemingly flamboyant credentials because they might lack the resources of getting to a really expensive school because of their background or their upbringing. Be inclusive and be intentional. And at the end, I like to share what Aubrey said with you. Do something, not nothing. The narrative is changing. And we are in this all together. We can change the industry little by little to make it more, not equal, like no, more equitable, more welcoming, more diverse, and more inclusive. Next week, I will be talking to my longtime partner in crime, Dr. Caroline Watson, on conducting study. She will be sharing with you how she selects students, her own experience studying with different teachers and different styles, and what you might be looking for when you are looking for a conducting teacher. I'm so excited about this month's conversations as always. And if you haven't already, please sign up and just subscribe for the podcast. And if you could, please help me leave a review on Apple Podcast because that's how I can reach out to more listeners. Have a great day, great week, and I'll see you again next week, same time, same place. Bye for now and take care.